You're live. We are live. So don't minimize or muck around with this window too much.
Once we pop here, I'll turn off the audio.
Yeah, so that must just kick in after the next. Yeah, because what I found is
It won't start for
3 minutes. Oh, so just close out right down. So just close out right down. There we go. And then just live in here. And you're going to be typing in there.
Perfect.
And then, yeah, if you don't rearrange this window, because the chat will disappear sometimes.
Okay.
Cool.
Ça va?
Yeah,
Welcome.
Yeah. Well, there's only one person in there, so you can see the people.
Yep.
And then, yeah, as they land in there. All right, all right. We are being go-getters and landing a little bit early, which is amazing. Just like this. Stand. No people in there now. That's all right. Sweet ball.
You have to build it up.
Yeah, so I kind of made this as like a custom thing, and normally people would sculpt on like a flat board and then work it out. But then I found that I could never get to the back of the head, so I kind of made this this would still be where the board would be, this angle, if you can imagine. And then if the board is here, you wouldn't be able to get back in there. So I just kind of made this jig for it. But yeah, so there's a little piece of wood. I just built it up with ball filled with so inside, yeah, it's you could push your finger into it, but it keeps it lightweight that way.
More malleable.
Well, and you don't want a 1,000,000 sculpture too. That's why I came up with this idea too, to offset it at the back, because all your mass ends up at the front. So I'm the only person I've seen with a sculpture thing like this, because normally you'd either do straight up and work that way. If you're doing a 2-part mold, you could do that. But I just like this angle one because I can get a 3/4 mask, but only not do a 2-part mold. So look at that. We got someone's in there. Maybe it's Brittany. Who knows? It is strange not being able to see people. I'm so used to facilitating and working in Zoom, where you can at least hear other people talk and that type of stuff. But let's see, I might stand as a. Yeah, normally this has would have some tunes going on, but I know also YouTube is very locked down. The one time I recorded a video and I just had my Spotify on in the playlist, and then the video got flagged for something because it was just on in the background, and I'm like, ooh.
Someone drove by in their car with Taylor Swift playing.
Yeah, and then
bam.
Whatever, I forget what the term is, but yeah, you get that cease and desist thing to take your video down because it's not compliant with YouTube's whatever rules. And hello, 2 people. Someone's there. What do I say? Hi, it's Heather. So there we go. Amazing.
Hi, Adam. It's Heather. Thanks for streaming this session. Send me a link later, and I'll post it to our website. Cheers.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather. Absolutely. I will post this same video. Will end up on my YouTube channel, and then we can just give you the share link to the stream so people can kind of tune in at their leisure, and then hopefully I'll have updated the description to kind of include some of the stuff we talked about today as well. There we go. All right. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of sculpt away, and then if you want to let me know if people are what are saying, who's tuning in, and what people are saying.
Yep. Do you want to describe what we're starting with today?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to wait a few minutes to a few more people kind of land it in. Maybe a quarter after, I'll kind of. It's only 1:01 now. I know we started a slightly bit early, so
we're excited.
Exactly, and we just wanted to tech check. It's better to tech check and land a little bit early than it is to be down into the wire. And
Heather's is perfect.
And Heather, can you hear me okay? Can you see okay? That'll be you'll be our guinea pig for our sweet setup we have going on here.
Volume's great.
All right. Woohoo! Score one for the good guys. Mm-hmm.
Cool masks in the background.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's some of my other stuff. I can pan up there, or I can check out a bunch of the other stuff. So as I finish pieces, it's kind of just my wall of wonders. It's got a pretty lumpy head. Yes, so today, on this beautiful, sunny Friday, August 6th, I am going to be attempting to sculpt a Yoda head from episode 4 Yoda, not the new Yoda, not Baby Yoda. Despite popular requests, we're not doing Baby Yoda today. I went old school Yoda, chose something alienish to fit in with the awesome theme of Go to Galactic. Just wanted something that people would recognize, and hopefully something that I can pull off, that looks relatively like Yoda by the time the 2 hours is done. Yeah, so right now in like these first stages, I'm basically just blocking out major forms. So you'll see me kind of like checking. I got obviously my reference photos here of what I'm kind of working off of. What I'm actually working off of is a reference of a full-sized Yoda copper statue that an artist, Lawrence Noble, did. I just really liked, he did a pretty good job of kind of capturing that old school Yoda look with a lot of good wrinkles and some good photos, good reference photos.
Yeah, can you move it out a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
So we can see.
My reference?
Yeah, just your reference.
Go. So, and it is always key to have reference like left and right, kind of like a front and a back. I always start with a bit of a mock-up and a sketch. They always say like practice safe design, use a concept. Having a rough sketch or anything like that, having your reference photos available. Any good sculptor would follow that. Making sure you have those references available. Yeah, I just liked the way this Yoda looked. Woohoo! 3 people, amazing. So I'm actually using a type of clay called wed clay, which is a water-based WED clay, Walt Eisner Disney. So it's actually developed by Disney way back when they started to do the mechanical rides and stuff. So they had to sculpt all those maquettes and things and creatures and stuff for a lot of those animatronical rides out of clay before they cast them. So this was a type of clay that was developed. It's got a lot of glycerin in it, so it actually starts off pretty wet, and then it changes in properties as it dries out. So it doesn't necessarily become dry and brittle. It actually gets a lot harder and waxier. So you actually, in order to get some of those finer details that you see in things, that happens as the clay dries out. So you kind of have to keep an eye on that as you're working along to pick when you start applying those details and stuff. So I'm just gonna do Yoda's got a bit of a brow going on. So he's gonna look pretty funny a few times as I add some of these major masses. It's like, all right, we're all done, guys. I'm a professional sculptor.
There we go.
But basically, yeah, sculpting in essence is you build up a large amount of mass, and then which is fairly straightforward and easy, all your major forms, and then you spend a lot of time refining those masses, so blocking out major pieces and then refining those back to a point where you get the detail. You'll also see me use this super high-tech tool here called butter knife. So I'm actually just going to use it to kind of mark a bunch of times throughout sculpting until I get to a spot that I'm into, like as far as some symmetry. So I'll kind of mark a center line. Yoda's a bit of an alien, obviously, so we know that his ears are going to fall a little further back than anything else. So I'm just going to kind of block in.
So these are just your guidelines.
Exactly. They'll be erased and put back, but it's just like as I kind of build out, I can just tell that brow now is going to be the same on both sides. I'll probably just beef up some stuff now as we're kind of chilling. Probably. So he's got kind of. And you're off to the side, just using like you could use anything, a guitar string, a piece of string. This is just a thin piece of wire, and I just cut chunks of clay off my block that I have here. I kind of normally just do that for the first, as I build up those initial forms, and then I just kind of free grab stuff off the block, like when you're building up that initial base. And yeah, I started off kind of just with a rough ball, like you saw. Like I said, wasn't too technical. I just wanted to get that kind of blocked out first before we got rolling here to save some time, because we only have 2 hours. So basically, in the middle of this giant ball of clay is this balled up newspaper inside a plastic bag, like that's about that big. And then I just put a bunch of clay around it just to keep it lightweight, give a core, and then that way, I don't use up a bunch of clay, and it keeps this thing light.
On the back there, is that just to hold it onto the...
These?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a dual purpose. So I learned the hard way once I kind of built this big mask up, and then it actually kind of got so heavy it kind of fell off. So I learned, since I won't wet these parts down, they actually act as kind of those tendons at the back of your neck. And so it helps anchor this to the wood. So as they dry out, they become pretty strong. And then that will kind of just act as, you have those muscles anyway on the back of your head. So anatomically, it makes sense. And then when it comes time to like mold, I would just break those off because I want to separate this from my base anyway. But that's exactly right. That's kind of some extra reinforcement that I added. Okay, Yoda's got a pretty round head. I'm gonna try to get this to make some progress on this. We're only 10 minutes in, which is awesome. But I'll probably start panicking when we only have half an hour left. Let's see.
How long does a mask usually take to sculpt?
How long does a mask take to sculpt? It all depends on, the devil's in the details. It all depends on how noodly you want to get with all your details and like how far you want to take something. You could blow out, like we're going to have 2 hours. This will be in a decent shape in 2 hours. If this was like something I was going to take to completion, I'd probably revisit it the next day and probably sink another 3 hours in to do all the details. So I don't know, 6 to 8 hours, depending on how crazy you want to get.
Heather says, I've never tried sculpting. It's interesting to see the early blocking and profile shots. Makes sense. And also you make it look easy. Yeah, they do, yeah.
It's actually really fun. Like once you, like I found, I had never, so October 17th will be 2 years since touching clay. I've never touched clay in my life. Watched a lot of YouTube videos, read a bunch online. Something that's always interested me was masks and special effects, makeup and creatures. And so it kind of combined a bunch of those things that I like as an artist. So very tactile with my hands. And then, yeah, just getting a little bit dirty and actually like just having your fingers in the clay versus what I would normally, my medium would be digital on the computer. So I lived and worked creatively in and on the computer for like 15 years now with my design business. So kind of winding that down and having some fun to explore some new mediums has been super refreshing for me as an artist. Very restorative. I think what we're gonna do, yeah, this guy's not too crazy. So yeah, when I talk about blocking out like major forms, so I'll show you like a profile. So I can literally like almost, if you picture like a silhouette, I'm just trying to look at the camera, which way he's facing this way. So I'm just matching the contour. If you think of it as a flat basic shape, like I want that to kind of be the same. I know that massive form's gonna be there, his cheekbones, and kind of blocking out some of this major stuff. So I know that will look cool from the side. I'm getting pretty close to like a really basic shape. And then front ways, you do the same thing. In the back, so you're almost just dealing with flat planes, and then you start to fill in the pieces in between to kind of bulk that out. That's when I talk about major forms. That's what I'm doing. So I'm kind of like, sometimes if I had I sculpted a predator mask, and they had that big crown that goes up on the head. So I was working on just like a basic core human head shape. So I basically had to make like a mohawk out of clay to build up that silhouette. I turned it sideways and it was just a mohawk, but then I had to build that down in the other dimension in order to kind of create those planes. So it's kind of jumping between those two things. You'll see for a lot of this probably the first hour, I'll probably just be using my hands and not any tools. And generally that's the way it goes. Like, the bigger the forms, the bigger the tools. So obviously the biggest forms are these blocking out using your hands, and not till you get more noodly and small and granular with the wrinkles and some of that stuff, then you start getting into smaller and smaller tools. So you have big rakes, big hands, big tools for doing some of this major stuff, planing some of this stuff, getting those shapes, where you want them to be. Even this I'm not going to probably use today because Yoda is pretty bumpy, and I want to kind of keep him that way. And at this point, the clay's, I won't wet it either because we're only doing 2 hours. You don't want clay that's too wet and slippery either because that just makes a big muddy mess. A lot of it's personal preference. I know I've seen some guys online that really love wet clay and working when it's all mushy and stuff. Personally, I would probably not do that.
What kind of working time do you get?
Like hours and hours. So yeah, like and some and it all depends on your block of clay that you get as well. So this comes from a company out of Toronto called Sculpt Supply Company. It comes in 2 15-pound blocks in a box for like $36, which is affordable for a medium. The stinger is the shipping, getting it here. So when you're shipping just dead weight via UPS, it can be a little bit challenging. So I kind of gang it all up and try to order a bunch at a time because its shelf life is a long time. As long as you don't freeze it, it's going to stay good for quite a while. So I kind of get this head a little bit. Sitting down is a little bit challenging on this guy because I'm so high up with it. And yeah, this thing, I don't know if the technical, it's called a kidney. It's just like a really thin piece that you can get out of plastic. This is kind of like an aluminum. And this is great for just planing like large areas. So if I wanted to kind of like really get a bunch of mass leveled off kind of the top of the head and some of those bigger things, I would use something like this. Again, I'm probably not going to use this too much just to kind of get these basic forms in, because it does leave all these awesome lines, which can work to your advantage depending on what you're doing with your sculpture. But if you don't kind of flatten them out, they'll harden like that. And then you have to put a little bit of extra effort into kind of getting those flattened out. Another high-tech tool is required called a toothbrush, and you literally just like have to run a toothbrush over the surface to kind of brush those out. So yeah, the back of Yoda's head is pretty simple. Kind of just some fat rolls, some old man neck rolls. I'm gonna get the ears on here soon, and then that will kind of help dictate a little bit more of what's going on. He's got these awesome. Again, he's gonna look kind of funny a few times. Other puppies.
He's got some serious, what do they call it? Crow's nests?
Yeah,
Under your eyes.
Yeah, which are fun. They're super fun. Like obviously, if you kind of look actually at a lot of my sculpts, there is that balance between the really age makeup. So like obviously adding like they've done here, and it looks like an old man wrinkly stuff. So you can make a makeup look super old, or depending on how heavy you are and how subtle you are with that stuff.
Hey Adam, that's a really large mass of clay. Is there anything special you need to do so that it doesn't crack as it dries?
Yeah, so I will get lots of working time out of this. So say I worked on this for 2 hours today and I want to come back tomorrow. I literally just a couple squirts of water and put a bag on it. And if you were to keep this not soaking wet, just kind of moist and hydrated, you could revisit it for months. Like I had one mask that I kind of I started, and then just like work happened and whatever, and I left it for 3 weeks with a bag on it, and I never did anything. And it was fine. So depending on, obviously we're all kind of in Canada here, so we don't have to worry about it drying out at a super fast rate. Yeah, so basically just keeping it moist. So I'm gonna see if I can kind of get these eye dents in here. This Yoda, he's got really fat cheeks. So he's kind of got this secondary. Yeah, he's got off the corners of his mouth. There we go.
Do you have any idea who actually created Yoda or sculpted him originally?
The original. You could Google it.
Yeah, let's find out.
Yeah, credit where credit is due.
Let's see what Yoda's Wikipedia page here. Voiced by Frank Oz.
That'll log me 20 minutes. Okay. I don't want to look too sad.
Yeah, do you need any time checks from me?
Probably every half hour.
According to makeup artist Stuart Freeborn, Yoda's face is based on his own and Albert Einstein's.
All right, there you go. I love hearing the inspiration and stuff.
It was redesigned by Nick Dubman from Stuart Freeborn's original design.
Yeah, so like with anything, like obviously I'm working from I'm trying to match a reference that already exists. When you're doing any type of creature or alien or anything, having a basic understanding of anatomy is super duper important. Something that I never I never thought about or anything but the more I got into it, the more it made sense to me. Like once I learned about the skull and how the skin goes on the skull, like I literally always have like Halloween is coming up. It's awesome. Like, so I have like some plastic skulls and stuff like that. Literally, like I'll just have this sitting again, just to kind of, I'll have it around like as even though this is not a human, but it has a lot of the same characteristics. Knowing you have like this ridge around the eye and this kind of indent, you can see those in the characters. So like those things are exaggerated or shrunk, depending on what your creature is. But having some of that, if it doesn't look based in reality, it's going to be, it kind of straddles that line of the uncanny valley where it just doesn't look quite right. So I wondered, I had got these big, so these are again from the dollar store, a really great resource for a lot of this stuff. These are like 1 1/4 inch foam balls, and I have some smaller ones. They're just in the craft section. They're great eye forms. You can get, these are actually, I don't have enough since I put my bag is in there, so I don't have enough mass. Normally I would dig a big hole out and put these behind it, and then just kind of use the whole ball, but I'm actually just gonna cut these in half and do the same thing. I want to get some eyes in and rough these ears in, and then we can start getting some of the other stuff going on. Yes, when I definitely stocked up a ton when Halloween rolls around. Like again, they have a lot of cool masks, just like cheap masks, like as reference material, or like you can actually cut, if you wanted to like cut a piece of a mask off and incorporate that into your sculpt, you can do that. Or if you just wanted to harvest the teeth or something from something.
Harvesting Halloween material.
Exactly. So I stocked up. Like I'm like, I don't even know what I need this for, but I'm gonna get it. So I'm gonna just kind of make a big hole here.
So you're telling me you got a bin of teeth somewhere?
I do have a drawer of eyes and a drawer of teeth for sure. Let's see if I can get this in here. There we go. The good thing about clay is if you don't like it, you are not married to it. You can fix it. And that's the other thing I've kind of learned over the course of the last couple of years. Learning how to use the medium is kind of, I kind of just rough those eyes in. At least gives me like a little bit more of a character now. So I just kind of poke some holes. Is not being scared to like start over or like to chop a whole chunk of your character off. The clay is super forgiving and super flexible. Like don't ever, the first couple sculpts I did, I was like, there's no delete key. Like whatever I've laid down is the, is it, that's all I've got. But slowly learning, it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, if I don't like it now, and I'm going to take it all the way to casting it and turning it into a mask, I'm still not going to like it. So why not change it now before it becomes too permanent? Yeah. So not being scared. So I got those cheekbones. I got my big fat Yoda jowls here. I'm gonna try to just got that cheekbone. Beef that up a smidgen. And then I'll go in with my, once I kind of get this stuff in here, I'll go in and rake out a bunch of these forms. So raking out is again using another high-tech tool that is a pretty standard. This is a homemade rake tool, and it is a bent bandsaw, scroll saw blade stuck into some really cheap copper pipe. So this one's more of like a right angle. Let's see if we can, I know people do this online. Oh, like, look at this. Can you autofocus? So you can make these, again, bigger ones for bigger forms, smaller ones for smaller forms, dual purpose. Other side, I have like a loop, a rake loop. So again, I can achieve different stuff. Super cheap, handmade.
That's just a copper pipe. You just
Copper piece.
Clean the ends of it.
That's it. I dropped a little bit of like super glue in there.
Yeah.
I heated up the joints when I bent them with pliers, and then just put it in there. So I have a couple different ones. I tried to really limit the tool set today. This is like one of the first ones I made. So it's all rusty and stuff, but it's a cool little loop. And then it had an awesome square rake. I'm so sad it broke the other day, and I used it for a couple years. But yeah, popsicle sticks. One of my other favorite tools is literally, this is just a popsicle stick with the end kind of shaved down, a little sanded down a little bit, like a butter knife. And so I use that for kind of like marrying clay. So if I put a worm on or want to kind of rough out a shape or something like that, my finger won't quite go in there. I can just kind of get in there and kind of join up some of those seams and kind of smush stuff around with that. Again, pretty low tech. Part of also what kind of drew me to working with this medium was the fact that there's no right or wrong. There's no like, you can buy professional high-end tools, but you can also, anything works. Like if you looked in my tickle trunk of tools, it's like cut off cat brushes and like a toothbrush and like a bent piece of wire, and it's whatever tool achieves the technique or the look that you want. So yeah, so let that build up his cheek. I'll get his eyelids in so he won't look so insane. So yeah, with the eyes, I just I had marked my center line. I just eyeballed these, pun intended. You can use calipers if you want to get super technical. A lot of what I do, I don't really get super finicky with measuring and stuff, just because ultimately it's supposed to look organic. So people aren't symmetrical. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is plop in these bottom eyelids and kind of set these eyes in here a little bit. Yoda's got some pretty heavy eyelids and stuff, which are fun. All I'm gonna do for that is make a little worm of clay, have it tapered both sides. I think this is gonna be too big. Yeah. It's too big. You just pinch it off, taper that side that I pinched off, and kind of left with like this little worm. And then you can do what they call in the industry a dry fit. So I might just be like, oh yeah, that's looking pretty good. That's a good worm. That one's gonna fit. And then maybe before I rest that in or sink it in, I will match the same kind of mass of clay. Use my first one as a reference. Again, not weighing these or getting super technical. I want it to look organic. I think it's really important to spend the time and get those initial shapes and forms done, like making sure this head like was the right shape and like everything is that foundation is there, because then all the stuff on top of it is pretty flexible. Like you don't, again, like I said, everyone's skull is pretty symmetrical, but the skin on top of it and the muscle masses on top are not. So this one's a little bit too big. When you are working with this wet clay, it does, you can't like roll it out really big and long like plasticine or Play-Doh, because it actually, your hands dry it out really quick and it becomes really waxy and stuff. So you have to kind of gingerly do it, or you can kind of wet it a little bit, but you can't achieve, so you actually need if you wanted to make a big long tube of clay or roll out a big long worm for some type of brain detail or some big long vein or something, you would have to use a clay extruder, which is just like a putty, like you put the Play-Doh in and squirt it out and it comes out, or the clay comes out, or you just kind of use two flat boards and actually just kind of put your clay in so your hands aren't touching it. Like I would use 2 pieces of plastic and kind of, I could massage out a big long worm if that's what I needed to.
So it's more your hands are.
Yeah, your hands are absorbing it. Like they'll be dry after this. Some people wear gloves, but I was like, no, what's the point? I love the feel of the clay. So I'd rather get some dry hands. Okay, so let's just get these in here. Not real science here.
You're at 35 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I get these eye forms in. Oh yeah, look at it's like a rough day. Got some big bags, under bags going on. So bottom lid first, and then I'm just gonna do the same thing for some top lids.
Yeah, Yoda was a little tired.
Yeah. And again, these are all like major forms. It's like I said, you can kind of get to that initial stage pretty quick, and then you can literally muck around with like little tiny things for so long, details. And sometimes what I'll do is when I'm kind of at that last stage before I'm about to mold it, I need to seal it. I'll actually just put a timer on, like a 30-minute like last looks timer. Like otherwise I'll just go for another 2 hours, like scraping little stuff in there, things that people would never see or care about. But yeah, so I kind of have to like make sure I do that to myself otherwise.
So your own timer for yourself.
Exactly.
Pressing in the clay there.
Yeah, just feeling like that. Again, I guess I'm not going to be molding this, so I don't have to worry too much about it. But ultimately, if I had any like gaps up deep inside here, like plaster would go in there when I go to cast this.
Yeah.
So I'd want to kind of like, what do they call it, like an underhang or an overhang. Yeah, I just want to fill all those kind of gaps in. That way, it just makes it for a cleaner molding. And when I go to pull these out. But I will not be casting Mr. Yoda. Three people holding strong. It's probably my mom and my wife and Andrew on his phone tuning in, making it seem like we're lighting up the boards here. So what I'll do is I'll kind of use my fancy schmancy. I don't want to ruin that bag too much. I do kind of want to marry it in there. Marry the clay. Hope everybody can see what's going on. So just kind of flatten it down, and again, I'll come in with smaller tools later on. I just want to kind of get some of this major stuff in here, so he's kind of starting to look like something. Those ears will really bring it out. I kind of have this nice, let's see, where's his mouth? I got his little jowl. When I was looking for photos of Yoda, I found that a lot of the people who had sculpted them, or the masks and stuff, like Halloween masks and stuff that existed, his face was huge. So, to me, Yoda's always been this little tiny thing. So he has like the bigger head and then kind of this smaller.
His body, you compare it to just a human, right?
Yeah. And again, as you're adding kind of masses of clay, thinking about thinking about where muscles and fat and tissue would go. So you're not everything's supposed to have a purpose. That way, it kind of makes it that much more believable. Yeah, if you just arbitrarily start throwing mounds of things on because it kind of looks cool, it may look cool, but it may not. I just won't. Like I said, it won't sit quite right, or just kind of. You can see right now that his jowls need to kind of be blended in a little bit. I was wondering how long until I made a Yoda impression. Oh yeah, totally. I think that's part of it too. Like when you're sculpting, like I know if I'm making a creature or something, I'm definitely making noises. I'm like,
As you
like,
go.
I'm like yeah, that's all part of it. Like you'll have your music.
Discovering what he sounds like.
Exactly, and it's building that persona and that character. Like a lot of the masks that I have up on my site and that I try to actually have a bit of a backstory or something to go with it. Like it's that you're building a character, right? You're not just making. Ultimately, the goal is you want that character to be alive. You don't want it to be a static statue, right? It should have some character, should have some life, even though it's not moving. It should definitely have that element of life to it. So whatever pose you choose and things like that. Looking again, kind of referencing my own work, like the very first ones I did were very static and just looked like a Halloween or a rubber mask, where some of the newer stuff that I kind of messed around with had, open mouths and kind of a little more character and age and that type of stuff. So again, kind of trying to create a bit of a story and a character behind it. Just because it's not moving doesn't mean that.
Now, as you're doing it, do you ever just kind of creating that story in your head and writing it down I remember you got the little blurbs.
Yeah, so I would kind of do, as part of actually kind of like the concept stage, and this is just the way that I work. I'd be like, okay, I know I want to like sculpt something, and then I'll kind of like look up at the wall of all the stuff I have done. I'm like, oh, I really want like a werewolf. Like I don't have any werewolf creatures, so I'll start thinking about werewolves. Check out a bunch of like other werewolves, and then I'll like kind of land on like an aesthetic, and then yeah, exactly. I'm the whole time kind of also coming up with a bit of a backstory, just like a mini paragraph. A lot of like I said, the ones that I have on the site are have like a little tiny blurb, like a character card. Like I'm gonna date myself, but a lot of like the Ninja Turtles and GI Joes and stuff, they'd all on the back, they'd have like that little story, and that just gave you like a launch off point for when you went to play and do and get your imagination fired up. So that's kind of where I kind of go. I kind of write a little bit of a story in my head, and that story, yes, absolutely may develop as I'm sculpting as well. And I may start off kind of a lot of what happens, unless you're trying to copy something exactly, happens in the clay happens pretty organically as well. So it's like, oh, like you hear, I think it was Bob Ross always talks about like happy accents. Totally what happens with sculpting. So like I said, I don't like to rake everything all flat and get it all like shiny and polished, because ultimately I want those bumps and those wrinkles and those little mounds, or I might be like, oh, look at this. I didn't even mean to do this bump here, but this looks to me like a lot. I like this right side a lot more than this left side. So then I'll kind of like look at that and I'll want to match that over here. And so a lot of that happens, like a lot of free form. Can sound super hippie and be like, just let the clay speak to you. The character's in the clay. And I understand like when people like talk about sculpting marble and like, it's there. I'm just letting it out. Not to that hokey extent, but I definitely, I totally believe that like, yeah, it'll just happen. Some stuff just happens and looks cool. And you're like, nice.
Well, what do you say about you pay no mistakes?
Oh yeah. It's like a good artist can fix a mistake, and a great artist can charge more for mistakes. So that's more like, I guess it applies to the painting or the sculpting as well. Like that was what I heard from when I was learning about airbrushing, and when I get into the painting of these guys, and I thought that was amazing. It's like, oh yeah, like I totally meant to do that, man. Like that was totally intentional. And then you're like, becomes like a technique or like something as well as you're kind of figuring this stuff out.
So do you actually use the clay form to cast your mask?
Yeah, absolutely. So this guy here, or like after I've sculpted and I'm all happy with it, I just use like a Krylon. So make sure 40 minutes. We're doing good. People have questions, I will answer. So Krylon clear coat, Color Max. So if this is all done, not wet, just kind of like dry to the touch, I'd spray it all about 3 coats and let it dry. So basically that coats it all, seals it all. and then I would cast it in plaster. So I use a plaster called Hydrocal 30. It's a big bag of plaster, dry powder that you mix with water, and you use that and burlap to create basically a cast around the whole thing. And then once that's dry, you peel out this clay, and then I'm left with my negative master mold that I can pour liquid latex into. So yes, the answer is yes, I would cast directly off of this thing, but this clay sculpture would be dead after you clean it out. It's game over. So you got to be
Sacrifice.
You sacrifice the original clay sculpture to ultimately get your master mold, so your thing can live on for not forever, but for a while, depending on how many casts you get out of it. Yeah, Yoda's got some cool. I liked his head.
Yeah, it's the
Kind of looks like a crocodile's back or something. And again, he doesn't have any hair, which makes that's a whole other kind of realm, is when you get into laying hair and stuff. So that's something I haven't done with any of my masks yet, is getting into hair work, just because it just is an extra. It's another skill, which I'm totally up for learning another skill, but it just adds a layer of complexity.
Are you able to edge that over time? It's just so that people can see the same one that you're referencing up here.
This over here?
Yeah, just a bit more. There you go. Because you and I can see it, but then
Okay.
kind of hidden.
People want to see that.
Well, it's just, yeah.
Not a problem. This is my coveted reference board. You can see all my spray paint and stuff on it from airbrushing. I'm just gonna get some of these major kind of wrinkles and stuff in here. Still haven't got to the. They come right around. Yeah, it's wrinkles right out. I like the way that looks. Still haven't done the ears yet.
Are you going to use any things to support the ears and put in there?
So yeah, if I was doing this for real, I definitely would have like a wire, could be anything I want, a dowel covered in tinfoil or whatever I wanted to kind of give a little bit of structure. The ears aren't massive in this one. Baby Yoda's ears are huge, because that's why I kind of originally was like, yeah, Baby Yoda, but his ears are massive. So it would just kind of get a little bit crazy. But yeah, so absolutely a bit of a support in there. But also keeping in mind how you're going to be molding it, because you would probably have to do a two-part mold or mold those ears separately and kind of build in part of your sculpt some wrinkles here where you'd maybe attach those ears on afterwards, or like, so you have to kind of think about the actual process as well. So you're kind of always kind of planning ahead. I know that I often, when I'm planning a sculpt as well, I'll think about, it's more often than not driven by the fact about what I want to paint, because I really enjoy the painting end of things. So I'll actually sculpt stuff and forms that I would think will look cool to paint. So that's kind of something that plays in there as well.
Yeah, you're saying that caught you by surprise in terms of, you originally thought you'd like the sculpting part more, and then the painting kind of.
It was kind of backwards in the sense that, like, I sculpted my first 2 masks and learned a bunch of stuff about the clay and all that. And I was like, cool, like I did it. And then I was like, oh, but then I just had these unpainted masks sitting around. And I was like, well, those are no fun. Like to have it display worthy, or like if you ever wanted to sell anything, you have to start, it has to be a finished piece. So that was a whole other unexpected skill set that I had to kind of get into and learn. And that's probably the part that I like the most now. If I had to like say, I'm sorry, sculpting, but sculpting's super fun and scratches a certain itch. But I really love the painting.
Yeah. Well, without sculpting, you get nothing.
Well, that's it. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the old saying is a good paint job can save a crappy sculpt, but a good sculpt can be ruined by a crappy paint job. So it's kind of a good skill. And I can't imagine like guys who would do this but never learn, like never want to paint their stuff or like want to do it and then give it to someone else to paint. Like people love painting other people's mess, that's one thing, but to never want to paint or finish your own mask, I found that kind of, yeah. Always interesting to me. And then it's not just painting, it's like, it's one thing like to paint, but then all your creatures have eyeballs and all your creatures have teeth. So like those are all other skill sets that I had to learn as well. Like how do you
create realistic teeth or realistic
so those are all techniques and stuff that I had to kind of figure out as well. Starting to look like something.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it just goes from such a rough form, and then you spend a little short work with the tool, and then you're like, oh, okay, I can see it.
Like that starts to like come together, and that's where like, that's what always amazes me. It's like this like nothing, and then every time. So like, again, part of wanting to do this live stream and talk about it very authentically and transparent. Like almost every sculpt I sit down to do, I absolutely hate for the first hour. Like this is stupid. Like this isn't anything like my drawing. Like I thought I could do this. Like what's going on? Like maybe today's a bad day. Always. And then by hour 2 or even day 2, it's to a space where I like it. I'm like, okay, cool. I could see this. Like it's starting to look like something.
Yeah.
So even coming from like me, like I always dislike
my love-hate relationship.
Yeah. There, so I have to kind of just like work through that and just know that that's part of it. Like not once have I, well, a few times I've done things that I haven't liked, but I don't share those. And to me, those are just part of the process as well. Like not everyone's going to be a win. Not everything has to be shared either. Like as an artist, like you don't have to show everything off on Instagram and all that. Like it's your journey and what you want to do with it. So it's remembering that too. And it actually wasn't till only this year that I started showing people my stuff, because I finally got it to a space where I thought it was good enough to show.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like my wall was like half full before I ever decided to show anybody.
There's this chin appearing.
So again, this is probably one of my most used tools is this rake. It's just great for like organically kind of like moving forms around. It's really great for just kind of seeing where things are, creating like motion and movement. Most of the stuff's kind of shown up on the camera, but like so if I was like, I may just be kind of roughing in that I like where you want that flow of your character to be, even though he's standing still. You want that flow to it, those shapes to make sense. Let's do this kind of that.
I think as humans, we're pretty good at judging realism just kind of innately.
Yeah.
Just being able to kind of pick out things, especially when you're trying to go for something that already exists and trying to recreate that, right? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And like something I didn't know, but makes total sense, just like anything, depending on like referencing what I was talking about, spending the time getting those initial forms done. So depending on what your dominant hand is, you tend to, one side of your sculpture is always bigger or like something because of the way you'll always kind of sculpt one way or the other.
Just prefer that.
Exactly. And there's no real, so you'll see me constantly jumping around and checking symmetry. Like, so I don't like have a method where like I go right in and do the nose and get it all detailed and then go do the eyes. So you're constantly, because things may change, or I may get like, if I spend a bunch of time detailing out this eyeball and then I'm like, oh shit, like this, the whole side doesn't work. I'm going to have to like lose all that detail.
Yeah.
So kind of bringing everything up to the same level of detail at the same time is super important as well.
Just increasing the resolution over the whole
Exactly,
thing.
and that's just it. It's like enhance. A little Blade Runner reference for you, but like that's exactly what it is. So I'm slowly just kind of going over here, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, neat. And like I said, you kind of like, I'll make note of like, oh yeah, I liked how this like form just kind of happened here on this one brow, and then I'll be like kind of check over here and be like, oh yeah, that brow needs to be brought out a little bit. So you're constantly just juggling between the two sides. 1 hour in, so I'll get these ears on. And then, yeah, what do I got going on there? Okay, ears. So, Mr. Yoda. Probably just gonna. Okay, I kind of know where you're gonna go. So ears are one of those things too, like they actually almost want to, I should have done this actually at the beginning, because when I talked about as the clay dries out, you can carve more and more detail into it. So if you kind of block out your ears where they're going, your masses first, and kind of leave your blocks of clay there and like kind of let them dry out a little bit, then it's one of the last things I normally do, because then they're hard enough that I can literally just kind of carve the detail and stuff into them. Because if I try to go after this right now, then I might put some of the basic lines in it.
Just want to give it that time.
Yeah, exactly, to kind of dry out a little bit. Yeah, I'm still mainly using. This ear's kind of come out. I'm still mainly using my hands for most of this. Looking at that, it looks kind of goofy. His ears always come straight out like that. Looking pretty good. As a basic shape, and I'll kind of support that a little.
So what's your jam when you're just in here working away?
My playlist?
Yeah, or just these, what's the latest flavor?
Spotify, and then I actually listen to a lot of like funk and soul. Pretty like, got a lot of beat to it. I know I listen to like a lot of like lo-fi hip hop and jazz instrumental. A lot of stuff with not a lot of lyrics. I find, because it kind of just puts me in to that kind of just like to that state. My mind, I'm very much focused on the actual sculpture itself.
Flow state. Or
that flow state. Yeah.
Time just kind of melts away.
Exactly. So again, I'm just going to kind of match the mass of that other ear. Pretty happy with where it is. It's kind of down the right side of the head. I'm going to fix these jowls. I'll match this to be the same. And sometimes like I'll have full intentions of putting music on, and then I'll just start working, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been sitting here like a weirdo in dead silence for 2 2 ears you have. Okay. Kind of rough that on there. Whoa, Yoda, mister, that ear's bigger. It's okay, we'll get you on. Get you on. And then clean some stuff up. We got 1 hour. Awesome. That's perfect. You're still clear. Just kind of rolling up some big worms of clay to kind of, again, just build up some of these bigger wrinkles. Just like the forms, you kind of do your bigger wrinkles and skin folds, and then you work your way to smaller and smaller. So I'll put these big worms in here and they'll kind of look crazy, but I'll end up kind of raking them all down and kind of blending them right in. I'm just gonna get some of these major pieces in here.
Did you make your swivel stand?
This guy?
Yep.
Yeah, so it is a Lazy Susan from Amazon it was like just the spinny wheel on bearings. And I got a high capacity weight one because I wasn't sure how heavy this stuff gets. I think it was $20. And then I just cut a circle, about a 13-inch circle out of wood. And it's been on there ever since. I screwed it in. Yeah, everything's homemade. Again, that's something that kind of drew me to it, is how low tech it all is. The stand, the jig, everything. This is just some piping, gas piping from Home Hardware. So the pieces in a flange, created that. Pretty standard stuff across the board when it comes to like armature and like your stands. Like if you see anybody sculpting, whatever you need a starting point to work off of. And yeah, those are the good ones to have. Just a nice Lazy Susan. And then yeah, just your whatever's going to work for you. A lot of people use. I started off with like a flat board. So like I would just kind of have this, and you can see all the residue on there. So I'd kind of build up a bit of a mass here, and then just do half masks here. So you're kind of working at a nice angle. But what I was running into is I wanted to do the backs of the heads on a lot of stuff instead of a mask being kind of cut right off, right at the back of like halfway up the skull. I wanted more of a 3/4. So I kind of just came up with this scenario, and it works. Again, I think it's of my own invention. So I've never seen anyone else using one. So it was, again, something fun to kind of think about and build and have the idea. And then for it to actually work as well.
Yeah. Innovate for yourself.
Exactly. I was like, this is going to work. This is what I need for me. So let's make this chin a little more prominent, and then I'll start driving in some of these wrinkles and stuff. You can see. So yeah, a really important thing to note is like, again, with the human anatomy and even our Mr. Yoda here is where that jaw comes in. So those are some of the key things. So the jaw always comes in and attaches just in front of the ear. So even though this isn't a human skull, but these shapes, like I am planning on like kind of building this just a smidgen to show that there's some type of jaw or structure under there, to kind of make it believable. So that's a little flat. And so I won't lie, I often, and if you were to like kind of check out underneath, a lot of my masks underneath the chin is always pretty unfinished, just because you never see it. And yeah, so I'll always like kind of obviously put something down there, but I never like really detail underneath the chin. It's more just there as a practical anatomy versus like, again, yeah, you don't really see the bottom of your chin. I guess in retrospect, they're all up on a shelf, so I'm looking at the chins, but I never put a lot of I don't sweat underneath the chin too much whenever I'm making something.
It's like cleaning the kitchen and just the lower side of the tap. Went down for our 1.5-year-old and looked up and just like, oh wow, that's really dirty from that angle.
Yeah. Well, that's like, well, my wife is short as well, so I'm always cleaning stuff up here, and then she's always like re-cleaning stuff. I'm like, what? I just cleaned that. But from her perspective, she sees a whole other like level of dirt, and I'm like, whoa.
Wonder if you'd ever change how you're sculpting it depending on where it's going to be viewed by.
Yeah, well, and that's funny. What happens too is like I'm like cool, and like I'm working at eye level, and I'm like make something, and then like I paint it. I'm so excited to add it up onto the shelf, and then I'm like, not that it looks bad, but it looks different, right? Because it's A, further away, and then B, it's like I'm looking at it from up underneath. So it definitely taking into consideration depending on where it's going to be displayed, how it's going to be used. Any of the stuff that I do is just for display purposes, like art collection, never intended for wear. Technically, I could, I would just change some of my painting methods to make them more durable, and seal them differently.
They're all what again? Acrylic?
It's all done with acrylics, water-based. That way I don't have to worry about fumes and just the flexibility and affordability of that. I use anything from like dollar store craft paints to whatever, anything that's water-based. You can thin it down enough and shoot it through your airbrush, which is awesome. All right, Mr. Yoda. So you've got a pretty. Let's try to. There it is.
What have you learned from your early mistakes?
Early mistakes. probably learning the different what can be done with the clay at different stages of its like learning like the medium, right? Like just like anything, like this clay is different than different types of clay. So learning how this clay reacted and how it dried out and what I could do with it. With my very early sculpts, I was like wetting it and like trying to like get all sorts of detail in and like doing all this stuff and like wetting it because I was kind of half watching videos and saw other people doing that. And then I was like blowing away all my detail. And I was like, well, how do these guys get these super complex, like realistic looking skin and all that stuff? So that would probably be my biggest thing is like the first couple I did, I definitely tried to achieve too much too quickly. And then also that taking a break. So like I've kind of, just the way life works with little ones and work and stuff. So if I sculpt, I normally sculpt at nighttime, stepping away is always super good. So kind of doing a rough block out and taking a break, fresh eyes, because I'll be like in love with this, say today, and then I'll come back tomorrow and be like, man, how did I miss that? That like this side has 5 wrinkles and this side has 3 wrinkles or whatever. So I would say that's probably one of my my biggest learning things from doing this, from my first ones, is taking a break, some fresh eyes, and learning about how the medium actually works. Got that. That's looking good. You got that. Look around his chin a little bit here, and then I'll get some of his forehead stuff in. All right. So I'm gonna start to rake in. This clay's still really, really wet. So this is just Kemper is so again, I started off with like super cheap tools that I just kind of got off Amazon to see and try before I invested. Like anything, there's cheap stuff, there's good stuff, there's crazy expensive stuff, like painting and anything. So this is just Kemper's the company who makes the loop tools for sculpting. And the difference between like this $10 thing versus $10 for another set of 50 off of Amazon is the fact that like these loops don't bend, so they can actually they're made of spring steel. It's actually quite durable, and if you kind of look after them, they're going to last a long time. So yeah, just like that old adage, you get what you pay for. So I'm just gonna, with this last 50 minutes, I'm gonna start kind of roughing in some of these lines. That's why I wanted Yoda, because he has lots of fun lines and stuff. And I'll put his nostrils in there. He's got this cute little nose. Where's my little mic tool? But yeah, relatively, like if you're interested in trying out sculpting, a relatively cheap on-ramp as far as like getting your tools and your supplies clean too. Like I just kind of, I set up, like I put my stuff away. I just have like a little, it's actually a cut up pillowcase on my thing. I catch all my little clay balls. It dries out. You can sweep it up. And then like literally I have this board. I always use this board, and I maybe you could do it at the kitchen table. You could do it in your dorm room. You could do it anywhere you have like, about 3 or 4 square feet. So that's what I also enjoyed, is that how clean it is. Clean and dirty.
You bring it on a plane. Saw a video of a guy brought a sewing machine on a plane.
Oh,
started sewing stuff. I think you have a little miniature turntable.
Yeah, I always think of that episode of Pimp My Ride, where like, obviously that show's ridiculous and not on anymore, but he would always like do it's like, oh, I heard you're into like fish, so we put a fish tank in your car. And the one guy, he was into sculpting or pottery or clay or something, and so what is it with Buster Rhymes? Is it Buster Rhymes? Is that the host? Ludicrous.
It's been a long
I don't
time.
know.
Yeah.
Whoever the host was, definitely like put like a turnout like Lazy Susan like and stuff for the guy, and it's just like, oh man. Super
Have you ever done like the pottery with the spinning?
No, my mom has.
Yeah, we tried it once. It is a lot more difficult
than it looks.
Oh yeah. And then like once you get it just close to finish, the tiniest little wobble, and it just
What did it
multiplies over and just destroys your whole cup or whatever you're making.
So, again, not being afraid to make changes. I just didn't dig those nostrils. They felt a little rushed. So I just kind of filled them back in. I'm just gonna refine this nose a little bit. Again, like things like the nose, and I would probably wait till this clay was a little bit more dry, so that I could kind of carve a few more details in. And I'll do it all. Oh yeah, I was gonna use this pencil. But first,
Pushed it all up.
yeah, just kind of change that form a little bit. I don't want to make them too pig-nosed. And then that little thing, it's important to have. I'm sure there's a technical name for it.
Oh yeah, what's that called? The divider.
The divider.
Just reminded me of. Did you ever play Mario Party?
Yeah.
One of the mini games, you get to drag the spots on like the face, and you have to try and copy what they do. Or if you grab like the nose and you pull it up, and everything kind of goes up with it.
Oh, really? So like all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Quarter after, nice. Just gonna fire in a bunch of these. So this is where you can start to. Again, I would probably, if this was a sculpt I had more time with, I would probably let this dry a lot more.
Yeah.
Before I drive in a bunch of these, but I wanted to kind of get some of these big defining, and that was another thing I learned a lot too. Is like. Is it's all those, like, again, life and nature is imperfect. So I was like kind of drawing these straight lines in and like trying to like almost like a pencil. But the really important is like to always kind of be, where is it? Always kind of be like moving your tool, and actually what you want to like kind of some broken lines too. So again, to kind of replicate that imperfectness, that natural, like those lines and stuff. Go in. Big. And it's okay to break the lines too. Like that's the other thing, is like if you kind of get too many going the right way, then it kind of looks kind of funny. So it's like, again, it's okay to kind of break those up. Looking at your own reference in your own hand is really great. Seeing how imperfect all those. Come on, autofocus. There you go. Yeah. So there's no lines that are connected. They're all made up of a series of broken lines. So I'll drive a bunch of detail in here. to get it to refocus. Look at that. Amazing. Yeah, I'll drive a bunch of detail in here, and then I can do a brush out where I actually just get some water and a brush and kind of gives it this finished look. Semi-finished. So we got kind of like this going on here. He's divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's another cool trick that I learned is somebody kind of cutting these out, but these work really great for actually making veins and stuff. Oh. So again, depending on where I was going with this, like I was before, you can totally make worms of clay and lay them on to make veins. But I learned that actually, as you're subtracting the clay for those other things, they work great in other places. So what does he have? Kind of this big plate in the middle.
The top of the head kind of looks like Star Trek Klingon.
Yeah.
From Star Trek.
And then he's kind of got this kind of smaller set here. So we got a big one in the middle. And then this kind of smaller one here. And again, thinking about, like, obviously I'm basing this on something that exists, but if I was kind of working on my own creature, I would think about this kind of flow. Like, again, like I had mentioned about always creating a flow and movement as you're working away. So like I want like the shapes of the face and the muscles to kind of create some interesting direction, and then your flow of your wrinkles and your skin, whatever that's going to look like. So you're always kind of thinking about that and reading it from a distance. So it looks different here. I'm looking over, seeing it in the camera versus like what I see right in front of me. How is something reading as a difference? I could get in here I'll use the term all noodly with detail, but that may not read across the room or on screen if this was like, if this was a creature for TV. You ultimately want to like not make it look like tool marks. So like I said, you can use anything you want to sculpt your whatever you're going for. But when you're finished, you don't want it to look like a tool was there. So driving it back into that organic realm, trying to not make it look man-made. Tell right now that this needs to go in a lot here.
Is the tip off of that pencil on purpose?
Yes, it is. I used it.
Miniature scoop.
I had used it on another sculpture, and I wanted to make a bunch of like irregular pock marks. And I have a bunch of different tools, but they all make like perfect circles. So I was like, what can I use that's the right size and would create a bit of a weird organic shape? And that is a broken pencil. I broke 3 pencils to get the right shape that I wanted, but it was totally worth the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a cool. Where's my coveted? Oh, I say that now. My half of broken popsicle stick. Where is that guy?
We had them, yeah.
Well, that's it. Never fails. That's okay. I used it over there. Oh. The show must go on.
Let's see if you had it in your hand. Might have to invest in 2.
That was like super
Popsicle
important.
sticks,
A lot of
so-
sentimental and emotional attachment to that.
Oh,
Oh, phew. So this guy is a popsicle stick, and I just dremeled like a point. So it does 2 things. It's really cool for making scales. So you get this kind of cool scale texture. And then by accident, I discovered that it makes a really great, so trying to, when you're creating deep like neck and wrinkles, it actually works really good for like such a simple, I should come down with those, but hold on a second. Yeah, it just kind of, what it does is just removes, like creates a bit of a valley and creates this really neat skin fold. So it's a really great starting point for
all your flaps.
all my flaps, your skin flaps. So it's kind of good for roughing that stuff in. Might even like use it to come in around here is always good. All right, we got our chin. What's our time there? Awesome. Still not stoked with this chin here.
Number 3, I guess we'll just
To the chin.
keep working on it.
It's like it looks good, and then like leave it and come back to it after doing something else. And that's the way it goes. You kind of make your rounds, and you're like, all right, this looks good. See, he's got kind of this. Actually, I'll use this. It's pretty good. I don't want to get too deep with this stuff. I'm not sure what the official name is for this tool. It's like a hook. So this is great for doing wrinkle work and all that kind of texturing and detailing. Again, this guy's pretty wet, but I can definitely drive a bunch of this in here, and then it will kind of give us a neat finished look. And it will look kind of messy as I kind of drive this stuff in. But when it comes time to kind of brush it all out, even all these kind of lumps of weird lumps of clay and stuff will look a lot more fleshy. Give some mass to the back of these ears. Yeah, let's keep working away, and then if you give me like a 15-minute warning, and then I can brush it out with those last 15. This sounds good. Oh, there you go. Oh yeah, I know we're gonna be. Okay, we have an hour 20 on the live because you can only live stream for 2 hours before it kicks you off.
Yeah.
So I know I was looking at the time, but yes, you actually have to look at the
Live time.
The live time. So I'm just gonna go along and further define some of these like weird alligator type ridges on his head. It's gonna look kind of messy and free form, but that's ultimately what I want. Kind of figuring out what's going on with this brow. Kind of these loose, kind of directional lines. I always find this part to be the most fun. You're really starting to bring out the character and the age, and this is when you can kind of maybe you want to rough in like a battle scar or something, or again all those little bits and bobs that will make your character.
Yeah, a lot of your guys got some good wounds.
Yeah, and that's something I tried to like work on every time I do sculpt something, I try something new, like a new technique, or just I obviously a different character that I haven't done, but always trying to not being scared to fail, or that it's going to be wrong. Like I mentioned that it's okay. Like it's only for me. It's my own creative journey. Bring this. I think. I don't know, Mr. New Rake. You're not as awesome as your predecessor. Never did. When you're trying to achieve some of this deeper flesh stuff, ultimately you want to get your tool in and flick it out, because you're creating these valleys and kind of bringing the material out, so in and then flicking out. And what you do is kind of get this deep undercut, and then this natural kind of skin fold over top, which is really cool. And then you can emphasize that even further by, once I have like a nice ridge, then I could actually add some more clay on top of it to kind of make that fatty edge, thinking of where gravity is sitting, pulling material down. So you can get pretty minute and realistic, but you really want to just envision it as flesh over top of bone, and adding those bits of fat and tissue in there as you're sculpting and building out your.
Imagine you get a much greater appreciation for anatomy and just how everything comes together.
Oh yeah, like I look at myself like in the mirror all the time, and I like make eye wrinkles. I'm like, well, where does that wrinkle go? Like maybe I can use that moving forward. Yeah, let's see what this got. Cool. Ears are like another missed opportunity. Like you can tell, not that I'm talking like I'm some type of seasoned expert, but like just after viewing a lot of different sculptors' techniques and stuff, so ears are normally a pretty big part of a of a sculpture, and they can either just be kind of left as like pretty minimal, or you have the opportunity to, like, if you ever looked inside like a dog's ear or anything like that, there's lots of really cool stuff going on. So you can actually bring something like Yoda. His ears are a pretty massive piece of his overall aesthetic. So
He doesn't have a ton of detail.
yeah, like,
inside
not that
the-
this is a missed opportunity. It's maybe due to like just an aesthetic choice or the way the puppet had to be made or something like that. But yeah, you have the opportunity to do some pretty cool stuff with ears. Don't be afraid to carve, like, yeah, like if you do like a bat creature or something, or whatever.
That's where maybe a lot of the focus of its survival evolution kind of was going into changing those organs. So
In Yoda?
no, just in creatures in general. So it's just they rely on their ears to survive, and there's probably been a lot of
Yeah.
focus on developing them. Yoda, what is Yoda? Yoda uses the Force.
Yes. Where is my script? Probably not going to get too much into the back of this head. My reference photo. Warts and stuff are super easy to make. Often a lot of my characters, I like putting warts and bumps and stuff on. It's just a matter of just kind of making a ball of clay and kind of flattening down part of it around the edges. What I'll do is, he's got a cool texture going on. Can actually, so you can get into some finer detail, or you actually use plastic over top. So now that this clay is quite, I talked about making those deep skin folds. You can actually put plastic over top of this, like saran wrap, or different types of plastics have different characteristics. And then I can press into the clay through the plastic to create those deep things, and then just pull my plastic out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really neat technique to kind of get into some of those more finer details.
And that way you're not removing any material, you're just kind of
Exactly, just kind of pushing it in.
modifying it.
Exactly, and then you can get some really cool puckers and weird organic shapes as that plastic is being pushed in there. I think this is too jowly. Let's fatten you up. Here. His nose has got. So just a little ball tool, a little ball bearing on here. You can use whatever you want. Often, it's good for creating pores. So you can get crazy with detail. I'm not going to get too crazy. I'm just going to go heavy with some simple details, and then I'll brush it all out. The nose is good for pores and hair follicles, that type of thing. It's got some cool dimples. I can be pretty aggressive with this because I'm going to brush it all out, which will make sense in a minute. Yoda's got this awesome, his age lines kind of come right down over his lip. guess I should do this other ear too.
20-minute mark.
All right.
It's funny how many people stress about wrinkles and fold, yet they make sculpture so much more interesting.
Yes, in real life, people go through great lengths to avoid them. But yes, those are the things that give us character. Give your characters character. Some super simple ears. Get rid of.
Hey Adam, noticed the Bride of Frankenstein poster on your wall. When you have a chance, check out the vintage sci-fi poster design.
Oh, for the festival this year?
Oh no, I guess you're just redacting the message.
Oh.
Maybe message for after. Oh, never mind. The vintage sci-fi poster in the back room at 20 Coldwater Road. So check out the vintage sci-fi poster design display in the back room at 20 Coldwater.
Oh, okay. Is that part of the festival, or is that just something that's there all the time?
Just for the festival.
All right.
Get it before August 22nd.
On it. I dig that stuff. Yeah, I went to a couple before pre-COVID to the ROM had a art show, an exhibit. The guy from Metallica, it was called It's Alive, and he has a vintage poster collection. So he put a bunch of his stuff on display. Some of these are really amazing, like 6-panel and 4-panel posters and stuff from like awesome, like Frankenstein and all that. Really, really cool to see them up front. Not a lot of that stuff exists anymore.
Kind of miss record covers and the liner notes.
Oh yeah, such amazing art and big art, which something you don't get anymore as well. Like the fact that they had to like fill up this giant space and had so much real estate, as opposed to creating like a little digital thumbnail or something that you get nowadays with stuff. Yeah, liner notes and just like album artwork in general is so cool.
Yeah, you don't really get a poster you can pull out and put on the wall with, with the medium anymore.
Yeah, you used to hang band posters. Yeah, you'd pull out the liner notes and hang them on your wall and have a poster of your.
And no more concert tickets to put into a scrapbook.
Yeah.
It's still nice to have our cloud-based albums. So.
Yeah, it's like a trade-off because I love that I can just stream, music anytime, anywhere. But there's all that other the drawbacks.
Yeah. 15 minutes.
All right. I will get to my little brush and my water.
Toolbox with all your little tools
it's actually a tackle box that I bought off of a guy on Kijiji. I searched vintage tackle box, and he actually was trying to sell it with all the tackle. I said, I don't want any of the tackle.
No.
You keep all that. If I can have the box for $30, you can keep all the tackle. And he's like, dude.
Yeah. So there weren't any lures that would carve out a nice shape for you?
No. So, yeah, these last few minutes, let's look at that autofocus. I don't know what you do to do this. Is that the thing? Cool. I'm just gonna some makeup brush. I'm gonna use a makeup brush because it's got a lot softer and finer bristles and some water. So a lot of those harsh lines and textures that I've put in here, I can actually start to make a bit of a clay slurry. So this is where you have to, it's a bit of push and pull, depending on how dry the clay is and how much detail you want to erase or drive in. So you might do this a couple times. So I might go really hard with these initial folds and creases and kind of wet this all and blend it all in. Really starts to make it look fleshy. And then I would have to wait till it kind of dried out a bit, and then I'd kind of go back in. I'm going to lose some of this detail, but I'm going to be able to come back in and carve those out. So I kind of have my primary wrinkles and then my secondary wrinkles. So it's a bit of push and pull. So this process here, some people, you can go as far as you want with this. This could be it if this is as far as I wanted. Personally, on this piece, I would probably let this dry out and then kind of drive a bunch more detail in, kind of get into those more those finer lines using another tool, like using like a cat brush or some of those other like scraper tools. You can really start to carve in some really awesome detail. Once it starts to dry out.
And how long, say, if you want to get it done, how long would it take before you could tackle it again?
If I really wanted to, I could hit it with a hairdryer, and actually you can get into a hairdryer and baby powder. So baby powder is where, because what happens is when you start scraping, you get, they call the technical term, they call them like boogers, like all these like little crumbs of clay as you're starting to get into those really micro skin textures and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
you hit it with baby powder, and then you can kind of brush away some of those crumbs. So then you're kind of juggling between drying it out, wetting it, brushing away details. So you're constantly in this state of flux. You can do some really cool things. Like if you had a bunch of balls of little clay and actually kind of got a really good slurry going on, it creates a very organic, looks like a pocket of fat underneath, like flesh underneath, like good for lips and stuff like that. So just experimenting, right, with all that different stuff. Hit this guy pretty good.
And did your tackle box come with a smell at all?
No, it was smell free, a little bit of rust. And it was perfect. It was the right size, and it was just what I wanted at the time. And I just wanted something that had been lived in and used. Same with my toolbox that holds all my airbrush paint. I got it at Restore, and I just wanted that retro used look and feel. quickly grab my other high-tech thing. Piece of sponge here. This is another, so I can kind of, with this, I can actually kind of push forms around a little bit and absorb some of the extra. Remembering as I'm doing this, I'm destroying and patting down some of my textures. That's why if I was aggressive or heavy with the textures at the beginning, it's okay because I can pat that down and kind of get that soften that up as I do this. The more I do this, and the sponge technique actually creates this really nice kind of almost like a satiny skin type of texture over the whole thing. So it's a good way to kind of, one of your final steps is to kind of do this if you want that look for your creature. I feel like Yoda would have satiny, leathery type skin. So yeah, I'm kind of actually just kind of mushing away some of the details I've put in, being aware of like not scared or worried that I can actually, I know that I can go back in. I know I was going to lose some of the detail. That's why I didn't get too in love with it. That was something I also learned as well, is like, you can always go back and add more clay until you're happy. Like that's one of the biggest learning curves, is that it's okay to add and subtract.
Last 8 minutes here. So
Yeah.
where do you think you're going to end up in terms of like percentage wise between being completely finished, just with what we do right in the last 8 minutes here? Like what percentage do you think you're going to be?
As far as like a finished mass?
The whole process for sculpting.
Technically, like this isn't terrible for the time frame.
Yeah.
I could stop right here and let this dry out a little bit and seal it, and then I could go on to cast it.
Yeah.
That type of thing. So this is pretty good. Like totally passable.
That's it's crazy how this the water and then sponging it out and it really just kind of
it just softens everything and kind of gives it that. I would definitely have refined the nose, and like my guy kind of looks like he's smiling a little bit, but that's okay. Passable as a Yoda in 2 hours. But yeah, so like this is, you could, like I said, tentatively kind of sculpt or seal this up and get ready to cast it if you wanted to go that far.
Mm-hmm. But like you said before, you said 6 or 8 hours for you to kind of go.
Yeah. So this would be an amazing day one. Like I would come back and probably, if this was going to be a finished sculpt, I'd probably sink another 2 or 3 hours into it and kind of just really like pretty up some of those details. But yeah, this would be a really great first. And I normally would only ever sit down and sculpt for 2 or 3 hours because again, I'm kind of doing it at nighttime, and you get tired and stuff as well. So.
Well, then you said you fresh eyes on the next day, and
so many times I was so in love and married to a sculpture, and then would come down and be like, how did I ever miss that? Like this whole thing's lopsided. Like no wonder. And I can tell I'll start to get frustrated that night. Like it's just not like sitting again. I'm that first hour. I'm like, I hate this thing. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
But then coming back down the next day, I'll like lop the nose off and move it up. I'm like, aha! Like that was what I couldn't see yesterday. But yeah, there in those last few minutes, 1 hour and 54 minutes, we kind of like a passable Yoda there on camera. It looks okay. Kind of the back's pretty neglected. That's the other thing, like doing a 360 sculpt. We got the top of the head. But yeah, I would definitely, this could take a bunch more texture and spend another 2 or 3 hours and kind of get it to a happy spot. But yeah. I'm asking about this one. Thank you. Yeah, if you want to see any of the other.
Yeah, do you have
We can do this. How does this work? So that's the first group on that shelf. And then got this was they're all kind of chronological as my skills kind of got better. It's getting pretty crowded. I don't know if I can make this third shelf. There's a light. So the other rogues gallery, and then I had done this. This predator head was probably one of the most complicated ones because he had all the jowls and the dreadlocks and stuff. He's a full size, so I had to do a two piece mold for that one, which is a lot more involved. But yeah, so I kind of got my big collection of stuff, and as I do new things, they end up on the shelf, and that's it. That's a little bit of the studio. Awesome sculpture. Well, thanks everybody. Yeah, we got 5 minutes. I'll hang out and keep an eye on the chat. My mouth is super dry from talking for a while.
What about, so right behind you there, that's what it comes out, the acrylic, or the mold looking like?
Yeah, so after it's cast, I think I have a mold. Yeah, so the clay sculpture would get covered in plaster, and then that takes like an hour or 2 hours to scoop out and clean out all your clay and get this all nice and clean. But now then you have your positive or your negative, negative, and then I'm able to pour liquid latex into here, and after about you let it dwell for about 45 minutes, dry overnight, and then you can pull out your actual like dried latex mask. Then you can clean that all up, trim off all your excess and cut your eyeballs out and all whatever you got to do. And then this is ready to be airbrushed and painted, however you want to do. But that's kind of the 3 steps: is clay sculpture, cast it, or create your mold, and then you can cast it in liquid latex. Do you have any interest in making movie props or masks? Well, that's kind of what got me into just sculpting. I don't know what the industry's like locally for creating any masks or special effects for film or TV. I'm mainly pursuing it as a fun hobby, and that's kind of as far as I would pursue it. I don't think I want to make a career out of it or anything like that. I just have a lot of fun doing it. I think kind of like anything, if you were to turn your hobby into a job, you might lose some of the shine on it. I would definitely take like a commission or something if somebody really wanted something specific. That would be interesting to do, and I'd be up for that if someone had a specific project and wanted something done for a cosplay or for a show or for like a Halloween thing or just for their own collection or something like that. I would definitely be open to that. It's light. Maybe cosplay is the way to go. Make elf ears, LOL. Yeah, there's definitely like a whole world, and even the mask world. Like it's something as I got into this, like out of the States, there's this whole niche market, just like there is for everything. People buying and collecting each other's masks, so they have their own mask collections, and it's this whole world. It's just a collectible art form. Again, with the cosplay stuff, it's pretty cutthroat. You know, you can go on to Amazon or something and buy a set of ears there's so much amazing stuff that's already pre-made. And I don't know if people would want to pay, what it would take to have an artist create something custom for them. But like anything, I'm sure there's a market for it if the right person came along with the right project. Awesome. Well, that is the end of that. 1:59:30. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. That was exciting. Thank you very much, Andrew, for moderating the chat there and keeping it alive.
No problem.
And yeah, maybe I'll finish up this Yoda and post something, some final pictures or something that we can share. I think we're gonna cut out soon, so. There we go. 201.